have these pancake breakfasts without our sponsors. And so I really want to give a big thanks to Oracle. Let's give a big thanks to Oracle Cloud. So, we like to make these breakfasts an opportunity for you to ask questions. And I know it's not always easy to ask questions, but we try to make it a little bit simpler for you by offering a prize. So you have received a ticket. Does everyone have a ticket when they came in the door? If you don't have one, raise your hand. There we go. Now, if you ask a question, you get 5 additional tickets. And then at the end of the breakfast, we'll have a drawing. And we're giving out Arduinos. Arduino, right. That's our kind of standard prize. So if you win, you get an Arduino, and you can come back tomorrow if you didn't win one, because we're having another breakfast in the morning tomorrow. So our discussion today is really about the evolution of Kubernetes, but increasingly how we are thinking about the ways that we can model data for machine learning purposes and for that grander vision of artificial intelligence. And it's come a long way. And still, though, the fundamental practices are really core and key to how we think about these architectures and how you think about managing them for yourselves. So I wanted to start by just asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask them a quick question because I'm really curious about the workflows and the processes and how their own teams are managing these new innovations so they fit with their processes and not having the technology dominate the process itself. So Bob, why don't we get started? Please introduce yourself, and thank you for being here. Thank you for Oracle sponsorship.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, I'm Bob Quillen. I'm the Vice President of Developer Relations for Oracle Cloud. Came to Oracle Cloud a few years ago, a Stack Engine acquisition, so I came here as part of the cloud native world. Stack Engine was founded in 2014, so we've been in container management for a long time. Not that long, I guess, but happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anne Kennedy, CTO GapSquare. So we're building the future of fair pay, allowing organizations to understand and analyze their pay data for employees and hopefully close any equal pay gaps. So we've been cloud native pretty much from the start, running on Kubernetes and all the fun stuff like that.
Hey, I'm John from Source Video. We are a video creation platform for teams. We enable brands to create authentic video content with their teams across the world in a really simple way, and it's a really easy way to edit video on your smartphone. I actually came from a background in astronomy and astrophysics, so I have a PhD in that, which is where I learnt Python, and then I got into cloud-native architectures when I co-founded the business, and pretty much our entire stack is Kubernetes. So.
Hi, I'm Bola Rotaby. I'm the Research Director for Creative Intellect Consulting, which is a UK-based analyst firm. Our centre of gravity is software development, delivery and lifecycle management. And as analysts, we are the ones who kind of look at all of these technologies and understand how they are implemented out in the real world. My background is actually, I'm a chartered chemical and process control engineer, and I have to say that I come from way back, even though my youthful appearance, where I learned Fortran and C, and then Java on VMS, that old technology, and moving on now.
So why don't we start with you and tell us a little bit about what your observations now in the overall marketplace as we're making this transition to container-based architectures. And it's still very early in the development, but as we all well know, new technologies become available all the time, and I'm curious on your context for that as we're thinking about, you know, machine learning and AI, and then how you see that, you know, how you see that in your own conversations and in analysis and research.
That's a good one. It's always difficult when you come to something and you're talking about some new technology, because I think as an analyst, I'm always trying to be the voice of reason, because I speak to a lot of organizations. And a lot of the times you go in and they ask about these new technologies, but actually when you sort of look underneath the sort of rocks, they're still battling with some of the old technologies and trying to get into, you know, the new way of thinking, but with old, you know, ways of doing things. So I often say, you know, I mean, you're right. Some of these, you talk about ML and AI, and whilst they're talked a lot in the news, the reality on the ground is that we've still got some way to go. And I would say that actually what is really important is getting the foundations right. Really understanding what it is that you actually want to do, what it is that you're tasked to do, and what actually impact that this is going to have both on your organization and the thing that you're going to deliver. And these things will never lead, you know, if you kind of think in that way, you're not going to go wrong. Then it's about getting the foundations. So actually, when you think about it, we're at KubeCon today, and I think, you know, what I've been impressed with is how far the technology has come along. And, you know, even in our own numbers, more and more people are looking to containers, but they aren't the silver bullet. And it's a case of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are other technologies as well, but it's really understanding how they fit into an IT architecture and an IT estate. So I know that may not sound like a very kind of, hey, great new technology, let's go and use it. It's that you want to use it carefully, because actually you want to sustain usage. And that's really important, because it really will do some amazing things. But if you go out and do it wrong, then you're going to piss a load of people off and they won't look into it.
So sustainability, and I'm curious from your perspective, and one of the things that we're wanting to explore in this discussion is the intersection of the art and sciences with technology architectures, and that seems to be more, that capability seems to be more available than ever before. And you're in the HR space, and you're looking to find ways to kind of to decrease that gap in gender equality, right, in the workforce itself. So how have you approached that with a Kubernetes architecture? How is that demonstrated in your own workflows and processes?
So we've been on a bit of a journey recently. We started out very much Agile Scrum. We'll deliver 2 weeks. We'll do demos. We'll do software updates. We've recently started moving towards continuous deployment. So we write some software, release tens of times a day. It's a huge cultural shift for the product people within our company, that the software is changing underneath them. Same goes for the machine learning aspect. We deploy a new model, a new algorithm. The result you got yesterday, looking at your data, may have changed because you've improved your model, you've taken in new factors. So it's been a journey in terms of explaining this to our users that, okay, this data set you're seeing is trained with this model on this data. If you want your previous results, we're going to have to reload the model for you and run it again in the old instance, as it were.
So Jonathan, you're a video collaboration and editing platform. You have a video collaboration and editing platform, and I watch your work, and maybe you could just explain the technology itself and how you've built that architecture with Kubernetes and how you're thinking about AI and ML kind of in that environment.
Sure, yeah, that sounds good. We allow brands to work with their teams across the world. Could be their fans. So we work with Manchester City Football Club. Any fans in here? No football fans. We work very closely with them, and they want to create brand videos to post out on social media. So they allow their fans to upload video content from across the world on match day, talking about how amazing this game is going to be, how they're going to smash Manchester United or whoever they're playing. And so video content can come in from across the world. It goes into our cloud storage. And then what we do a lot with Kubernetes, we work very closely with Kubernetes jobs. So whenever it's a little bit like a functions architecture. When a video comes in, that triggers a bunch of Kubernetes jobs to transcode that into different formats, to generate thumbnails. Each is a tiny little process that goes off, that is monitored with our application. And then we also have similar processes coming off to analyze the content and to do speech detection, so that we can then leverage off to power our intelligent video editor that can assist you in making your brand video.
Wow.
Manchester City can, yeah.
How quickly are you able to process that data from around the world and then push it out for people to view?
The thing is with YouTube existing, people expect video to process instantaneously. So we're trying to live up to that. I'm not sure we're quite at YouTube standard yet, but people expect videos to be processed within seconds, maybe minutes, and then they're using their phone, so when the video is processing and editing, they're expecting it to live update to their touches, and the editing to come back and assist them, in near real time. So,
Bob, managing expectations in this world. What's your view on that? What's Oracle Cloud's view on managing those expectations? And what are you learning from your own internal practices and what you're hearing from customers about their own operations?
Yeah. So, thanks, Alex. I think the biggest challenge for us has been, watching the teams we work with, especially on the larger enterprises, and the cultural change they're going through. Automation has always been a key tenet for DevOps, and Kubernetes being kind of one of the foundational pieces of automation now. But we keep adding more and more tools, more and more technologies to automation. So how do we actually, deal with the new changes that happen on the other side of that? So we add more tools, we add more automation. Now comes complexity. Now comes, issues around cultural change and training, and how do we bring the people forward there? And there's kind of you're walking up two different ladders at the same time. We're progressing, both these forward. There's technology, there's people, and I think we're seeing now with managed services, helping folks, in particular, leapfrog complexity. So a lot of the enterprise teams that haven't been able to adopt immediately can now use managed services in the cloud to leapfrog all that complexity. And you talk about AI, ML, and what's next there. That's another form of automation that helps you improve complexity. Now, as we add, go through that sustainability and complexity improvements, we got to continue to watch how the people are coming along there and not leave folks behind. And that's really, I think, where we are now as a community. Is we've jumped ahead in a lot of technology, and now slowly the managed services and all the training and all the support's coming up to help the people side of it. I think technology has jumped ahead a lot. We're really good at solving technical issues, security, networking, monitoring. A lot of those are coming up and getting better on the Kubernetes side.
And those are part of the traditional processes, right?
Yeah, those are traditional processes. And as technologists, we're really good at fixing those. But as we fix them, we add more tools, and then we have to find ways to bring the people along and learn from those tools also. So that's the next big step there.
So I have a lot of questions, but I want to first, before I do that, I want to introduce Job Jackson, co-host today. He's a managing editor at the New Stack. And now we get a chance to hear from you about your own questions that you might have about their experiences in building out architectures. What are some of the questions that you have as you're building out your own, your own environments? Remember that if you ask a question, you get 5 tickets. So are there any first questions that we can get from the audience? There's one in the back.
Hello, my name is Roel. I work at Capsida here in Barcelona. My question was about when you use Kubernetes for video transcoding, that's like heavy CPU intensive task. How do you manage resources? What is the size usually of your nodes? How you can this scheduling for these huge tasks? How you manage like operable limits when you run tasks and that kind of resource management for these kind of tasks?
Sorry, that was how do we manage our video services? Is that right?
Yeah, and Joe, maybe you could help. There's a little bit of an echo here, so maybe you could help kind of like encapsulate the question that was just asked. Did you?
Oh, yeah, I think if I'm correct, we're kind of interested in what architecture you're using, what components. If you're using Kubernetes, what's the setup? How many clusters? How many nodes? That sort of thing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so our setup is We have probably 3 production clusters and three testing clusters, 3 dev clusters, and what they're basically running Python Flask applications or just straight Python applications. I mean, I started off in Python, so it's the way I've kind of driven our team, but there's no obviously reason why we couldn't use other languages. And so Flask is running our RESTful APIs that you can, so all of our components are kind of built very separately. So we have a video processing components that basically anyone could leverage. It's just a RESTful API that you call. It adds a Kubernetes job to then process a video with some parameters. That video will then process, upload back to our storage, and like I say, we use a lot of monitoring to make sure these processes are working very well. So that's kind of Grafana and Prometheus and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's kind of our main architecture. Does that answer your question?
Does that help?
Yeah, was more oriented on the size of the nodes, because when you transcode, you need like a lot of CPU usage. So how big are the nodes for your worker nodes?
How big are the nodes?
How big are the nodes? Yes.
How big are the nodes? So we leverage some NVIDIA K80, did I get that right? K80 GPUs with nodes that sort of number of cores might be 60 cores, like some sort of number like that. And then, so each one could be processing a few videos at any one time. It kind of depends, like if you put an hour-long video, then you need a really big, powerful node. And we might actually, for very long videos, we'd actually dynamically add bigger nodes to process those really huge videos. And then if you're just processing, so a lot of our content's kind of 10, 30-second videos, that sort of machine would process it almost instantaneously. It would be really powerful. Then you could have a large number of videos processing at once.
Do you have any other question? Great.
Since you mentioned Flask and Python, actually, I have 2 questions. First one is, how do you deal with the global interpreter lock for the Python Flask? Do you scale per user or per video request? And second question, do you have anything in front of your Python Flask application like WSGI or Nginx or whatever, because the Flask itself doesn't have good performance?
Yeah, exactly. I'll just keep talking. Yeah, so our Python Flask applications, as you probably well know, Flask is very, very lightweight, really amazing tool for just building small microservices. So we tend to keep our components very, very small, and we sit Gunicorn in front of it. Have you heard of Gunicorn? Yeah, it's very similar to Uwhisky if you've not heard of it, and so yeah, Flask just isn't built with its own like production web server in it. You just sit Unicorn in front of it, and so that's what's in front of that. And then we have the Kubernetes Nginx ingress in front of that, which is then distributing traffic between our many small microservices that we're running. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Something for the audience, actually. As an analyst, we're always trying to find out what's going on. Could everyone raise their hands up if they're, actually using containers in their day-to-day work? Okay, that's great. That's good. And now keep your hands up. Okay. How many people have been using it for sort of longer than 6 months? Okay, keep your hands up. Longer than a year? Okay, so there's quite a level of knowledge set, actually, in the audience. So that's really good to know, because a lot of the times when you hear about these new technologies is that it's like a learning, sort of exercise for a lot of people and to understand. But the other thing I would like to know, and this is just shout out, everyone, what's the biggest challenge that you've had today in using containers? Anyone, just shout out. What's that?
Why don't we just talk? What? Why don't we give the
DevOps.
mic to someone who's yelled out and they can talk about it a little bit too? That might be helpful.
I think debugging is the biggest one.
What was that?
Debugging.
Debugging, okay.
Debugging.
Okay. Anyone else?
Patching the OS within the containers.
Okay.
Okay. Patching the OS, here's another one.
I think biggest one is getting developers to be operationally aware. So
Oh,
now you're
that's a good
putting
one.
something in a container. It's like a,
Oh yeah, I think round of applause there.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
anyone over here?
State.
State.
Yeah. Okay, this is what I feel that these things are actually all about, actually. I mean, it's been great, sort of, Jonathan telling us, in terms of his experience, and I think this is what is a lot of challenges that for a lot of organizations that they have. All of these things, especially around the developer side, because a lot of the times, we're sort of led into and I come from a development background. I kind of started my life off in Fortran, C, Java, C++, and then, sort of various other things. And it's a case of developers are expected to do everything. You're now going to be doing operations and all of this kind of things. And I think there's a level set, and I think containers helps that kind of sort of raise that sort of a collaboration awareness for both sides. And I think this is actually what's really important, is the fact that we talk about DevOps, but the reality is that, for a lot of times it's been big dev, little ops. And I think containers helps to kind of readdress that balance, to be more of a balanced story around dev and ops. And I think that's something that I'm actually starting to see. But I think it's right, is that it is about making developers more aware of the operational environment that they're deploying their applications into, and about ops, understanding some of the challenges from a development point of view in terms of what the things, the deployment environment they happen to deliver. So I think that's a really, really, really good point. And if it's one thing that I would actually say for everyone to learn, is that that's something to take away from. It's a rebalancing of the relationship.
Yeah. And
To your point there, I think the end-to-end ownership piece is super important. You need to understand how the software is built and how it's going to be used in production. If you're building software and it's only going to run on some really tiny nodes, like your video processing, well, you need to be aware of how it's going to be deployed at the end of the day. So using things, say Kanban, and having your developers track their work through to production, great, you get people really bought in to actually keeping that running. So I've built this thing, it's my baby, I'm going to keep it alive, I'll shoot it in the head if it misbehaves, but I'll build it, patch it, fix it, and keep pushing forwards.
Okay. One more question, actually.
sure.
I kind of wouldn't mind everyone standing up. Who feels happy with letting go and the amount of automation that is growing in their, sort of development environments? Kind of stand up. Who feels really happy with that level of automation?
Yeah, all right.
I mean, to be honest
Anyone
with you,
else
no,
wanna
keep
stand up?
standing, keep standing. So so you're happy with the level of automation. Can you kind of, can we get a mic to some of these guys? Because I would like to understand. What? Sorry, I'm kind of taking over.
This is great.
This is what
No, thank you
analysts
very
do.
much.
Never let an analyst
This is
on a panel.
This is great.
What makes you feel happy about the level of automation?
You can automate testing and deployment, and if you automate them, they're not going to work straight away, but when you've been through the hoops a few times, they'll work more smoothly than they would have worked in the past normally, if you've got a decent team.
And how confident do you feel with the automation tools? How confident?
Well, it depends which tool, but if you use something regularly, it does what you need. It can be a shell script. That's an automation tool.
Well, this is interesting because, look, how many of us? 1, 2, 3. Well, there's only like 3. And how many people in this room? It's probably about what?
About 200.
Yeah, exactly. So they're happier with the level of automation, and you guys aren't. And yet, the fact is, you're going to have to get a lot happier with automation. And that's one of the things, is that you should be asking yourselves, why aren't you happy with this level of automation? Because actually, that's going to stop you from actually progressing forward. And it could be that the tools aren't right. It could be that you're using the wrong tools or anything like that. but you need to kind of figure out what it is about the automation that you're not willing to give it a go, because I think that is going to really be the barrier for you going forward. And in fact, you've got to kind of get over that and learn a little bit more about, you know, what the tools can do, because otherwise we're hiding to nowhere.
Bob, I would just like to get Bob's perspective on this, you know, on that getting to be comfortable with that automation. That's always been an issue, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we found, especially over the last probably year and a half, we have a lot of customers that are WebLogic customers, Java customers, obviously database customers at Oracle, and finding ways to connect those communities into the Kubernetes community in the cloud native world has been kind of a major priority. We built a WebLogic operator for Kubernetes and for WebLogic. So WebLogic Kubernetes customers work together now. We find those customers beginning to move their workloads to the cloud in a context they know. So WebLogic team can use Kubernetes and layer it on top of what they know already. We have an open source project called Helidon, which is helping Java teams move to a microservice framework, connects to Kubernetes and is a container-based architecture. So helping Java teams work within a microservice context. We are announcing a service broker for Kubernetes, which can connect to database technology. So database teams are moving to the cloud, can run database services, use that with our managed Kubernetes services. So you find, how do we help build these bridges to existing communities? They use Kubernetes, they use automation in context to things they know, versus having to learn all from scratch. And I think, you know, what we found, we go into these teams, they're like, well, we can't learn all this technology. We just learned Kubernetes, now we're learning Prometheus, we're learning Grafana, we're learning all these other new tools, and they're falling further and further behind. This allows them to kind of leapfrog all that problems, all those complexities, and manage from the context they know. So I think that's one of the areas where reaching out to the communities that are there and building these operators, these brokers, these API gateways, which allow you to connect to things that work better together. It's kind of that next phase of the hard work of integrating everything together. It's not just a Kubernetes world, it's all the application components together. So.
Actually, we have another tale of automation success, or testimony.
Well, I think, remember, we're all humans, right? And I think people have to realize that no matter what technology we choose, no matter what tool we choose, the human aspect is always there. So I don't care if you've got the best Jenkins, you've got the best TeamCity, you've got the best pipeline. If that does not fit with your interaction with your developers, with your community, with your contributors, whatever it may be, you have to build something that makes sense, right? Forget about the technology, forget about why we're here. We're changing the way people push software out. However, if you don't accommodate the human factor, you're never going to win. I mean, that's the best advice that I can give to folks, right? You know, you could learn everything, you could read everything, you can contribute to everything, but if you cannot connect with your customers, connect with your consumers of your platform, you're going to lose bar none.
So how do you kind of accommodate what he's saying? Like, how do you think about that?
In terms of the way we're operating at Gapsware, we do the standard, we'll score the tickets, we'll discuss them, and then ownership is assigned, and someone will work on that ticket. And as soon as they're ready, we'll review it, and then it's straight in the pipeline to production. So that individual who's worked on that, we get Slack updates when it's passed through end-to-end testing in our dev environment, once it's deployed into staging, once the tests are passing there, and then finally into production. So they can see that they're adding value almost instantaneously. Okay, the pipeline takes about 10, 20 minutes to go through all those stages, but it's in the product. Customers can then start using it. And then if something goes wrong, they're incentivized to fix that because they've introduced that problem. So the interesting shift we've had is from the product side. So the product's updating and they need to tell customers, how do we manage that? So not quite there yet. We've got now a status up page in the app, but it's how do you let people know that what they're using is changing under their feet, but for the better, as it were.
All right, we have another question.
Building on from the kind of previous point there, I agree that kind of CI and CD is really good, and it's definitely a much better way forward. But how do we enforce a proper security culture, especially in developers, so that they're not accidentally leaking credentials or building security holes, especially when most of our security advisors don't really understand the products that are being built at the time. So a developer will say one thing and implement something completely different, and the security assessors will not know any difference unless they're told to what they're doing.
Yeah, how do you integrate security into the development process in such a way that...
So we're managing this through currently some automated pen testing that will run on our environments. It's not perfect, but it's a start for us. So we'll run these tests. I think it's once a week at the moment against production. We'll get a score. Did we pass? Did we fail? Yes, we're not running those on every update to master, so it's harder to trace back where those security concerns may have been introduced. But as soon as we're aware of them, we can raise a ticket and then start to go fix that immediately. Generally, we have internal training and discussions, and I guess
when it comes to security is the level of support that we get from Oracle Cloud is by far and away better than any other provider that we've had. We've worked so closely with some of their teams that have helped us build security infrastructure, have helped us talk to different people who can just really narrow down exactly what we need. And all the different cloud providers have great aspects, but for me, like the level of support that we've had with Oracle is their highlight factor for us.
I mean, I think this is, the common theme that I would say that's coming out today on the panel, and certainly what we hear from clients and in my experiences is very much about making people aware and that level of education and training. And I think actually post-mortems is really, really important. And sort of understanding, even if it's not inside your own organization, but things that might have been publicly, sort of vulnerabilities, public security vulnerabilities, and understanding, what the impact that might be, doing impact assessment from your organization perspective, but also how, to kind of avoid that. I think that's the danger is that security is kind of seen as a hygiene factor. And it's always going to be somebody else's, kind of like going to capture it, whether it's going to be the platform that capture it, the tools, or even the security team. And I think it's about taking a level of ownership and responsibility, but also about bringing the security team in from the beginning, and I think this kind of, to talk to a lot of the things that people are kind of, I think about next generation application, it's really about breaking down the barriers between different roles. It's about actually bringing them in at the very beginning so that everybody understands what is the kind of like the requirements, what are the goals, shared ownership. And I think that's the only way that you're going to obviously support with the right tools and the right platforms.
Bob, I'd like to hear what your view is on the security posture. As we're starting to think about container architectures, especially as we see more software supply chain attacks happen. We saw one on Docker in the past few weeks, for example. And the conversations I'm having is people are saying, we need to build security practices almost into the open source projects themselves. And I'm curious about your perspective.
Well, I think it's kind of cool. We hear like two different parts of security here. We hear a technical aspect, which is, you're working, and from a cloud provider perspective, we kind of build security in the Gen 2 cloud for Oracle from the bottom up. So it's kind of, if it's Oracle, it's got to be highly secure. And so anything you build on top of that is going to have a very strong security posture. On the flip side of that is the communication side, is the people side, is how you do post-mortems. So you got to have a strong technical base, you got to have the communication, and together that kind of forms that security posture, and they work with each other. The desire to do the whole DevSecOps movement is kind of a good example of how DevOps is coming together, shifting left into security, building it in from the beginning, and we see that more and more as being kind of the foundational part of where the next phase is going. We see a big focus also around container security, which has improved tremendously over the last probably 6 to 12 months. It's less of an issue for customers now, but it's still something that everyone's looking at on a daily basis, and it kind of comes from focusing on both sides of the security side, the people side, the communication side, the process side, but also picking the right technology and baking it into what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one more question.
Any other questions?
Hey, I'm Makran. How do you manage a database upgrade? Like, we talk about container, but container running databases in containers is still far-fetched dream, and mainly for data integrity point of view. How do we manage the VM-based database upgrades while doing your blue-green or canary deployment?
How do you manage databases or?
Database upgrades.
Oh, how do you manage database upgrades in a containerized environment?
I could talk to it from a managed services perspective. The Oracle has focused on that from the database side is that there's a whole new set of autonomous database services in the cloud that manage all those aspects for you automatically. As you lift and shift and move and improve your applications into the cloud, the autonomous database services that Oracle's offering is pretty cool. They can be connected now through service brokers into Kubernetes, and we're seeing people, improve their applications, lowering costs, improving performance, but also modernizing their architecture as they do that. So that seems to be the pattern that is the go-forward pattern that is recommended in terms of how, if you're moving to the cloud, use these new autonomous services. They do the updates for you. They're all automated. So.
What if for one reason or another you want to use an open source database or you want to manage the database yourself?
I missed the question there.
Oh, well, what if you're managing your own database?
Do you guys have any?
Yeah.
Move it down the line here.
I was just going to say, we don't manage our own databases. It's super hard. Push it off, make it someone else's problem, your guys' problem. The only thing around schema updates is we have a process, backup, upgrade, and have the ability to roll back in case anything goes wrong.
I think passing the load off to someone else sounds like a great idea. I wish I'd thought of that a few years ago.
Cloud services.
No, we run primarily MongoDB and a little bit of Redis as well. So we deploy that to our cluster with Helm. The Helm scripts that are available for those open source database are incredible. The defaults get you started really, really well. They do a lot for security, but the configuration that you can then add on that is really, really simple and easy. And your upgrade process is extremely well documented. The open source community is just, it's what everyone else is using out there. So we haven't had any real pain points other than, like you say, documenting these things, being prepared to roll back if it goes wrong, and obviously, testing it thoroughly in advance.
The keynotes are coming right up, and so I think we need to wrap up right now. Let's have a drawing. Judy, are we ready for the drawing? Everyone have their tickets. Well, here we go. Let's just do this. Let's do this. Let's read those numbers.
574474. Anyone? Blue?
Let's go again.
Okay. Yellow ticket. Yellow ticket, 901295. Anyone? Oh,
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you so much to Oracle. Let's give Oracle a big hand for sponsoring this breakfast. Have a great day, and we'll be back tomorrow for another pancake breakfast. See you soon. Have a great show. Let's catch up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Plan to see you guys.
Yeah.